Breathe in the air. Let it fill your lungs. It is heavy, thick, and suffocatingly wet. We are standing deep within the untamed primordial jungles of Java. The year is 1293. High above, the oppressive tropical heat beats down through a dense emerald canopy, baking the muddy earth into a humid oven. For the men resting in this makeshift clearing, this green hell is entirely alien. They are men of the open steppe, riders of the bitter cold plains, are the conquerors who have shattered empires from the rugged borders of Europe to the rocky coasts of Korea. They are the soldiers of the great Mongol Empire, and right now, as they catch their breath in the sweltering shade, they believe they have just won another easy, glorious war. Look closely at them. The iron tension of battle has evaporated. They are stripping off their heavy lamellar armor, casting aside their sweltering iron helmets, and wiping the thick, greasy tropical sweat from their brows. Laughter echoes through the dense foliage as they pass around hollowed gourds sloshing with sweet, fermented palm wine. They are celebrating. They drink alongside their native Javanese allies, the very men who helped them navigate these treacherous, snake-infested rivers and crush their local enemies. The Mongol generals sit comfortably in the muck, boasting of the gold, the exotic spices, and the slaves they will haul back to the great Kublai Khan. They are untouchable. They are the apex predators of the medieval world. Then the jungle erupts. It does not start with a battle cry. It starts with a whisper, a sudden, terrifying hiss of poison darts tearing through the thick, humid air. The raucous laughter abruptly stops as a Mongol officer clutches his neck. His veins turn black almost instantly. His breath catches and chokes in his throat as he collapses to the dirt. Before the Mongols can even scramble to reach for their discarded swords, the tree line explodes. The native allies they were just drinking with, the men they trusted to guide them through the darkness, turn on them. The betrayal is executed with devastating, ruthless precision. Blades flash, catching the dappled sunlight. Javanese warriors burst from the undergrowth like violent phantoms, their jagged, crisp daggers slicing through soft, unarmored flesh. The Mongol camp descends into absolute, screaming chaos. Conquerors of the known world are slipping in the bloody mud, stumbling over their own discarded armor, completely blind and disoriented in a tangled maze of vines and suffocating heat. They are no longer fighting an army. They are fighting the jungle itself. The generals roar frantic orders that no one can hear over the deafening din of slaughter and the metallic clash of steel on bone. In a matter of agonizing minutes, the invulnerable Mongol war machine is broken. Are fleeing in absolute terror through disease-ridden swamps, hunted down like wild animals. How did this happen? How did the most feared military force on the planet walk blindly into an open, muddy grave? This is the story of how a prince with absolutely no army, a man starving and hunted in the unforgiving wilderness, tricked the deadliest military machine in human history into fighting his own civil war. It is the story of how he stabbed them in the back, stole their massive naval fleet, and used their own advanced weapons to build one of the greatest, wealthiest empires Asia has ever seen. To understand the sheer audacity of this betrayal, we have to pull the camera far back from the blood-soaked swamps of Java. We must look at the world as it was decades earlier, basking in the golden age of the Singhasari kingdom. Imagine an island paradise that is not merely beautiful, but unimaginably, staggeringly rich. Java was the beating heart of the global spice trade. Every merchant ship groaning under the weight of nutmeg, cloves, sandalwood, exotic gold passed through their turquoise waters. Their bustling ports were choked with traders from India, Arabia, and China haggling over fortunes. Java was a maritime superpower. It was a kingdom built on bottomless wealth, unmatched naval supremacy, and absolute supreme confidence. At the head of this wealthy kingdom sat King Kirtanagara. He was not just a king in the traditional sense. He viewed himself as a mystic, a divine ruler, a living god who held the spiritual and political center of the universe in his palms. He was proud, he was brilliant, and he was dangerously, blindly arrogant. From his towering golden throne, surrounded by massive war elephants and endless halls of riches, the rest of the world seemed very small. But the world was not small. Thousands of miles away, in the grand sweeping capital of Dadu, sat Kublai Khan. The Khan ruled the largest contiguous land empire the human race had ever seen. Armies had burned ancient cities to ash, toppled centuries-old dynasties, and completely rearranged the map of the earth with the tip of a spear. When Kublai Khan looked south toward the sprawling islands of Indonesia, he did not see a divine king. He saw a vassal waiting to be claimed. He saw glittering wealth that belonged to him by right of absolute conquest. And so, the Khan did what he always did. He sent his imperial envoys across the sea. These were men accustomed to seeing foreign kings fall to their knees, weeping in terror at the mere mention of the Mongol name. The envoys arrived in the royal court of Java, carrying the emperor's heavy decree. They stood before King Kirtanagaraza in his own grand hall and demanded that he submit. They demanded he pay tribute to the Mongol Empire. They demanded he bow. King Kirtanagara did not bow. Instead, he committed an act of defiance so suicidal, so unimaginably bold, that it sent shockwaves rippling across the known world. He did not merely reject the Khan's demands with words. He ordered his royal guards to seize the Mongol envoy. In the dead center of his grand court, with absolute silence falling over the onlookers, King of Java had the Khan's representative held down against the cold stone floor. Kirtanagara ordered a brazier of glowing hot iron to be brought forward. With agonizing, deliberate cruelty, he branded the envoy's face, searing the flesh as a permanent, blistering mark of Javanese defiance. Then, he took a sharpened blade and sliced off the envoy's ears. Mutilated, bleeding, and utterly humiliated, the envoy was thrown roughly back onto his ship and sent home to China to deliver the silent, bloody message. It was the ultimate insult. The king of Java had spat directly into the face of the apocalypse, and now the apocalypse was coming for him. When the mutilated envoy stumbled into the magnificent echoing court of Kublai Khan and revealed his scarred, earless face, the silence in the throne room must have been terrifying. The wrath of the Khan was absolute, a cold and calculated fury. No one defied the Mongol Empire. Cities that resisted were not just defeated in battle, they were systematically erased from existence. Think of Baghdad, once the shining jewel of the world, rivers running black with the ink of 1,000,000 books and red with the blood of its citizens. Think of the great walled cities of China and Eastern Europe, reduced to towering, windswept pyramids of human skulls. Now Kublai Khan turned that world-ending, merciless fury toward the tropical island of Java. The logistical machine of the Mongol Empire roared to life, and the sheer scale of it was absolutely terrifying to behold. Entire forests across southern China were systematically chopped down, a crash of timber ringing out like the drums of war. Thousands of shipwrights labored day and night, their hammers echoing relentlessly across the coastal ports, constructing a massive armada. This was not a quick raiding party. This was a massive punitive expedition designed to wipe the Singasari kingdom off the face of the earth forever. 1,000 massive warships were built, painted, and assembled in the docks. Into these ships poured the most battle-hardened veterans on the planet. 20,000 to 30,000 elite soldiers marched in lockstep up the wooden gangplanks. These were men who had broken the back of the Song dynasty, men who had besieged impenetrable mountain fortresses, men who lived, breathed, and consumed warfare. But they did not just bring standard swords and recurve bows. The Mongols were bringing the absolute bleeding edge of military technology. They loaded their holds with brilliant Chinese siege engineers, men capable of building gargantuan, creaking trebuchets that could hurl massive boulders with devastating, bone-crushing precision. They brought armor-piercing crossbows equipped to punch straight through thick, woven jungle shields. Most terrifying of all, they brought the Thunder Crash bombs, early gunpowder explosives that produced a sound so deafening and a blast of shrapnel so lethal that terrified enemies genuinely believed the Mongols commanded the raw wrath of the heavens. They loaded enough grain, salted meat, and supplies to sustain this massive army for an entire brutal year. The sheer momentum of this fleet was an unstoppable force of nature. It was a dark, suffocating storm cloud gathering over the South China Sea, bristling with cold steel and explosive fire. The Mongols were bringing a mechanized, highly disciplined apocalypse to a tropical island. There was no negotiation left on the table. There was no ransom big enough to be paid. King Kirtanagara had invited the devil to his shores, and now the devil was sailing south. Java was entirely, utterly doomed. History is a master of cruel irony. The grand apocalyptic showdown between the arrogant king of Java and the furious Mongol Empire never happened. Before the very first Mongol sail even pierced the northern horizon, the political landscape of Java violently shifted. The kingdom fractured from within King Kirtanagara, so obsessively focused on his own divine power and his bold defiance of the distant Khan, became completely blind to the daggers shifting in his own shadows. A massive, bloody rebellion erupted right in the heart of his kingdom. A rival ruler, a disgruntled vassal named Jayakatwang, saw the king's vulnerability and struck with ruthless, blinding speed. The usurper's army marched on the capital, the ground shaking beneath their feet. Royal Palace, once the legendary seat of unimaginable wealth, was brutally sacked and burned to the ground. The divine king Kertanagara, the man who had mutilated the Mongol envoy and thought himself a god, was cornered and slaughtered in his own sacred temple. His kingdom was stolen in the night, his dynasty shattered like glass, and Jayakatwang claimed the throne of a bleeding, fractured Java. Enter our protagonist, Raden Wijaya. He was the dead king's son-in-law, a proud prince of the royal bloodline, and suddenly, the most hunted man on the entire island. Imagine the sheer, clawing desperation of his reality. One day, he is a prince of the wealthiest maritime empire on earth, draped in silk and gold. The very next day, he is running for his life through the dense, unforgiving jungle. He is starved. He is exhausted. His royal clothes are torn to mud-caked rags. The usurper's assassins are hunting him through the brush with snarling dogs. Every shadow hides a poisoned blade. Every rustle of leaves sounds like an executioner. Wijaya is forced to flee across the choppy water to the barren, unforgiving island of Madura. Put yourself in his bare, blistered feet as he stands on the rocky shores of that exile island. The math of his situation is completely impossible. Behind him, on the mainland, the usurper Jayakatwang commands a massive, victorious, blood-drunk army that wants his head jammed onto a wooden spike. Wijaya has no soldiers. He has no kingdom. He has no wealth. And out there, somewhere over the vast blue horizon, 1,000 Mongol warships carrying 30,000 seasoned killers are sailing directly toward his shores. They are coming to burn a king who is already dead, and they will surely slaughter anyone remotely connected to the royal bloodline just to make their point. Raden Wijaya is trapped. He is squeezed between a usurping army that wants him dead and a mechanized Mongol apocalypse that wants his entire world turned to ash. He is backed into an impossible corner. There is no way out. It is in this absolute abyss of despair that Raden Wijaya does something completely unexpected. He does not draw a sword. He does not rally a suicidal charge. Instead, he reaches for a far deadlier weapon. He uses his mind. As the colossal Mongol armada finally breaches the northern horizon, darkening the coastal waters of Java with the shadow of 1,000 wooden hulls, Wijaya watches from afar and realizes something profound. He spots the one critical, fatal flaw in this invincible, world-conquering war machine. It is a weakness born of sheer distance. These Mongol soldiers have been crammed onto ships, tossing on the open sea for months. Their lines of communication with the mainland are agonizingly slow, stretched across thousands of miles of ocean. They are operating in a complete information vacuum. They have absolutely no idea that the political landscape of Java has violently shifted beneath their feet. They have no clue that King Kertanagara is already cold in his grave. This realization is the spark of pure genius. This is the Machiavellian masterstroke that will completely rewrite the destiny of Southeast Asia. Wijaya does not flee into the deep jungle to hide from the invaders. He actively seeks them out. He orchestrates a daring gamble, sneaking a small, tight-lipped group of envoys and eventually, himself, straight into the sprawling, chaotic Mongol landing camp on the coast. Imagine the suffocating tension of that moment. Picture this ragged, exiled prince, his skin darkened by the elements, walking unprotected into the Grand Command tent of the Mongol supreme leaders. He is surrounded by massive, battle-hardened veterans of the northern steppe, men clad in heavy iron and boiled leather, men who could casually order his execution with a simple flick of a wrist. The air inside the tent is thick with the scent of foreign tobacco, sweat, and animal grease. One wrong look, one stutter, and his life ends right there on the dirt floor. But Wijaya spins a lie so masterful, so beautifully calibrated to feed the insatiable arrogance of the Mongol commanders that they swallow it whole. He drops heavily to his knees, prostrates himself before them. He presents himself not as a defiant enemy, but as a broken, loyal, subjugated prince seeking imperial justice. He looks the Mongol generals in the eye and tells them exactly what they want to hear. Claims that his late father-in-law, the old king, was indeed a wicked, foolish man for insulting the great Khan. But then comes the twist. Wijaya loudly claims that the usurper, Jayakatwang, is the true ultimate enemy of the Mongol Empire. He tells them that Jayakatwang staged the bloody palace coup specifically to stop Java from submitting to the grand will of Kublai Khan. Then he offers the generals a deal that sounds far too perfect to refuse. He offers them his absolute, unyielding loyalty. He offers them his intimate, lifelong knowledge of Java's treacherous, snake-infested jungle terrain. He lays out his local maps, offers the blades of his remaining loyalists. In exchange for all of this, he asks for only one small thing: that the mighty Mongol army rescue his stolen kingdom from the hands of the usurper. He promises, with his hand on his heart, the very moment the usurper's head rolls in the dirt, he will formally bow before the Mongol Empire, hand over the entire island, and unleash a river of unimaginable tribute back to China. The Mongol generals are tactical geniuses on an open battlefield. They are complete strangers in this humid alien world. They are arrogant, they are hungry for quick glory, and they are desperate to secure the vast riches of Java without wasting months chasing phantoms through the brush. They look down at this broken, desperate prince and see nothing more than a perfect, easily manipulated puppet. They buy the lie completely. Without spending a single gold coin, without risking a single one of his own men in the opening gambit, Raden Wijaya has just acquired a 30,000-man, world-conquering army to fight his own personal civil war for him. What follows next is one of the most brutal, chaotic, and downright bizarre proxy wars in the annals of human conflict. The Mongols, acting entirely under the strategic guidance of Raden Wijaya, unleash their apocalyptic fury onto the usurper Jayakatwang. Within days, pristine, muddy rivers of Java begin to run thick and dark with human blood. It is a terrifying clash of two entirely different worlds, a collision of military philosophies that the tropical canopy had never witnessed before. On one side, have the Mongol heavy infantry and horse archers, their skin blistering and sweating beneath layers of heavy, suffocating iron armor, stubbornly marching through knee-deep tropical mud and dense vines. On the other side, the Javanese forces deploy their ultimate weapon: massive, armored war elephants charging through the tree line, the earth literally shaking and groaning beneath their stamping feet as they threaten to crush the northern invaders into paste. But the Mongols did not just bring horses and bows. They brought a terrifying, mechanized apocalypse. The Chinese siege engineers quickly assemble their engines and deploy the thunder crash bombs. Suddenly, the deafening, unnatural roar of early gunpowder shatters the humid jungle silence. The sky tears open. The sheer, concussive force of the explosion sends waves of panic through the Javanese lines. The war elephants, animals that had never heard the voice of gunpowder, completely lose their minds. Blinded by fear, they turn around and stampede backward through their own ranks, crushing their own infantry in a frantic bid to escape the noise. The mighty stone fortress of Kadiri, but the seemingly impenetrable stronghold of the usurper Jayakatwang, is systematically pounded into smoking rubble by heavy Mongol trebuchets hurling massive boulders day and night. In a matter of mere weeks, Jayakatwang's forces are completely obliterated, scattered to the winds. The usurper is hunted down and captured. His proud army is broken. The Mongol generals stand amidst the smoking ruins, victorious and proud. They have done exactly what Raden Wijaya wanted them to do. They have fought his war, crushed his rivals, and handed him back his stolen kingdom on a silver platter. Now, the ultimate trap is sprung. The Mongols, firmly believing the war is won and the island is theirs, finally let their guard down. Iron discipline that conquered the world begins to fray. They strip off their heavy, sweat-soaked armor to feel the cool breeze. They begin the tedious, greedy work of cataloging the immense mountains of gold, glittering jewels, and royal captives they intend to pack into their ships for the long voyage home. The Mongol camp becomes bloated, sluggish, and thoroughly drunk on victory and local palm wine. Raden Wijaya steps back into the camp, his face masked with quiet, deferential respect. He approaches the victorious generals, bowing low. He tells them with a smooth voice that the time has come for him to return to his ancestral village to gather the grand, glittering tribute he promised to Kublai Khan. But, he notes casually, roads are still dangerous, plagued by bandits and remnants of the rebel army. He politely requests a small armed escort, just 200 elite Mongol guards, to accompany him into the interior, orally to ensure the massive treasure is collected and transported safely back to the coast. The generals, suspecting absolutely nothing from their seemingly grateful puppet, nod their approval and wave him away. The 200 elite guards march proudly into the thick, closing canopy of the jungle alongside the prince. And then, the silence of the forest is broken by the sound of tearing flesh, the very moment they are completely isolated. Deep within the treacherous, maze-like terrain Wijaya is hidden, rested reserves spring from the shadows. It is an ambush of pure, ruthless efficiency. The 200 elite Mongol guards, caught completely unarmored and single file on a narrow mud track, are butchered to the absolute last man before they can even realize they have been betrayed. But Wijaya does not stop to celebrate. He immediately rallies his newly liberated kingdom. He sounds the heavy bronze war horns, their deep, resonant blare echoing across the valleys. A massive hidden Javanese army, fresh and fighting, with the furious fire of men defending their homeland, sweeps down from the hills like an avalanche upon the main Mongol landing camp. Conquerors of the world are caught completely, utterly off guard. They are unarmed, barefoot, and still celebrating their easy victory. The pristine coastal swamps instantly transform into a horrific nightmare of blood, screaming, and unadulterated panic. Legendary warriors of the steppe are pushed back into the disease-ridden, sucking mud, hunted like wild dogs by warriors who know every single tree, every hidden path, and every quicksand bog in the forest to survive the onslaught. Proud Mongol generals are forced to make a devastating, humiliating choice. They abandon the mountains of gold. They abandon the royal captives. They leave their heavy equipment to rot. They sprint for their lives toward the shoreline, scrambling up the sides of their warships in sheer terror, fighting a desperate, bloody rearguard action on the wet sand, while the shifting monsoon winds threaten to trap their fleet in Java forever. They frantically hack through their own anchor ropes and flee out into the safety of the open ocean, totally broken, bleeding, and defeated. When the black smoke finally clears over the tropical canopy and the roaring waves swallow the last of the retreating Mongol sails, Raden Wijaya stands alone on the beach, completely unchallenged. He looks out over a deeply shattered, blood-drenched landscape. The entire board now belongs to him. The usurping king is dead, his head in the dirt. The invincible, terrifying Mongol army has been thoroughly outsmarted, routed, and chased off his shores in absolute disgrace. And best of all, the fleeing invaders left behind a priceless treasure in their desperate scramble for survival. Massive stockpiles of their advanced northern weaponry, their master-crafted siege engines, and their cutting-edge gunpowder technology were left rotting on the beaches. Wijaya systematically gathers these advanced spoils of war. He steps boldly into the massive power vacuum he so brilliantly engineered and crowns himself king. He founds a brand new empire, choosing a name that would serve as a permanent reminder of his humblest, darkest days. He names it after the bitter, unpalatable maja fruit he was forced to eat while starving and hunted in the wilderness. He calls it the Majapahit Empire. This kingdom would not just survive. It would explode into a sprawling, golden maritime titan. Armed with a blend of native naval mastery and captured Mongol gunpowder technology, the Majapahit Empire would grow to dominate the vast waters of Southeast Asia, seizing absolute control of the strategic straits and commanding the global spice trade for centuries to come. Raden Wijaya took a literal death sentence and used it to forge one of the greatest golden ages in Asian history. Here is the fascinating detail that the standard history textbooks so often choose to leave out. Why is this epic cinematic saga of ultimate betrayal and geopolitical triumph not as famous as the bloody battles of ancient Rome or classical Greece? Why is it buried in the footnotes of global history? The answer lies in the deeply fragile ego of global superpowers. The Mongol Empire simply could not afford the catastrophic embarrassment of this defeat. When the battered, ghost-like remnants of the Grand Fleet finally limped back into the ports of southern China, empty-handed and missing thousands of their finest soldiers, Kublai Khan was pushed into a state of absolute unbridled fury. He immediately ordered a total cover-up of the disaster. The high-ranking commanding generals who had allowed themselves to be so thoroughly outsmarted by a young jungle prince were dragged into court and severely publicly punished. They were stripped of their vast wealth, their ancestral lands, and forced to endure 17 brutal, skin-tearing lashes with a heavy whip in front of the assembled nobility. Official Mongol historians were ordered to heavily minimize the entire expedition in the imperial records. Carefully manufactured narrative of absolute Mongol invincibility had to be preserved at all costs, even if it meant completely burying the historical truth about the brilliant Javanese prince who stole their fleet. We look back through the mists of time at the muddy, blood-soaked shores of medieval Java. We are forced to confront a profound, inescapable truth about the very nature of warfare, power, and human survival. The Mongol Empire brought absolutely everything a military force could ever possibly need to ensure the total, unquestioned destruction of their enemy. They had overwhelming, crushing numbers. They had elite veterans whose skills were forged in decades of relentless, global conquest. They possessed the absolute bleeding edge of military technology, from armor-piercing crossbows to devastating gunpowder bombs. They carried the sheer, paralyzing psychological terror of the Khan's name. By all logical metrics of history, they should have won. But Raden Wijaya proved to the world that brute force, massive numbers, and advanced steel mean absolutely nothing when stacked against a man fighting for his very existence with an absolute, flawless mastery of deception. The Mongols fought their battles with physical weapons. Wijaya fought his battle with the human mind. He took their own overwhelming arrogance and transformed it into a fatal snare, turning the greatest military machine on Earth into his own personal utility tool. It stands as a stark, timeless reminder that the deadliest weapon on any battlefield is never a sword, it is never a bomb, and it is never a massive armada of warships. The deadliest weapon is, and always will be, the human mind calculating its survival in the darkest, most desperate abyss of despair. The Mongol war machine seemed entirely unstoppable to the rest of the world, but history is ultimately written by the survivors, and sometimes the deepest truths are intentionally hidden away by the embarrassed losers. If you want to uncover more of these forgotten conflicts, brilliant historical betrayals, and the untold gritty history that they absolutely refuse to teach you in school, make sure to hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. It is your support that helps us pull these incredible forgotten stories out of the shadows and bring them back to life. And before you step away from the screen today, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. What historical empire do you think suffered the most deeply humiliating, catastrophic downfall in human history? Until next time, keep digging deeper and always keep questioning the history you've been told.